Hello everyone, welcome to episode 5 of Title Hunt. In these videos, I document my experiences trying to become a national master in chess. In this episode, I'm going to be going over round 2 of a quad tournament I played in a couple of Saturdays ago. This round, I was playing black against my opponent. All my 3 games this tournament were against people that were within 10 points of me rating-wise. So it was quite the experience playing just a bunch of people that were pretty much my same rating. And I definitely learned a lot from each of my games. So I'll just be going over this one today. My opponent opened with e4. Of course, I responded with the Scandinavian defense. We played into the main line. He played this knight f3. Some people play bishop to c4 first. But after knight f3, I developed my bishop to f5, bishop to d2. I played e6, hoping that he would go for this line, which I have played actually quite a bit. And in this position, a lot of high-rated players, even in rapid, I think even like I played like a 2400 rapid player who blundered this move d5, thinking that it's going to be opening up the center after takes, and the bishop's getting open to take this knight, and then the rook's going to come, but then you just castle queenside, and the pawn is pinned to the queen. So you can go for this. This is actually still not terrible for white. Practically, computer says that it's minus 1.7, but practically material is almost equal. I've actually lost this position before, which has been sad, but it still gives black a lot of good chances to win. But unfortunately, my opponent did not go into this. I mean, these are all just pretty natural mainline moves, though, for the Scandinavian. But instead, my opponent played this knight to b5, which, after bishop d2, if you go e6, you're aware that this knight can move with a discovered attack on the queen. But, first of all, two of the moves don't help white at all. Two of the moves, well, let's see. So these two moves don't really help white because you just move the queen out of the way. Now the knight is not in the best place, especially this move. Two of the moves just lose the knight because the queen can take. Two of the moves are better, but still, I don't know. I'm not convinced that they're the best choice. In this game, my opponent played knight to b5. Now, obviously, queen to b6 is the only move, getting out of the bishop, the attack of the bishop, and still guarding c7. And my opponent continued with a4. He thought a little bit before this move. I mean, it seems a little bit early to be trying to take advantage of my queen being here. And maybe just a bit weakening to be pushing this pawn. And actually, the best line is for me to play a6. Now, I never thought about playing this because I thought after a5, I have to go queen c6 and the knight moves away. And I didn't really like my queen being here, but computer says you just move it back to d7 and you have a slight edge in the game, which is an interesting line I'll have to look into. Most people I play don't really play a4 in this position, though. Honestly, most people don't play knight to b5 here. More common is knight to e4 because they think they can at least damage your structure. But this position is actually just pretty much equal. Because even though we have this damaged structure, we can still castle queenside, and then we have this open file for our rook. So it's not terrible even in this position to double your pawns. So it's a little uncommon for this move order to be played. In fact, I wonder if I've ever played a position online from here. But I instead played c6, just making an escape score for my queen, which is still good. He did push a5, so I ran my queen out, and then, of course, he retreats the knight. I think, yeah, I mean, the computer says knight to a3, which is very unnatural. It feels much more natural to move back to the middle, but I guess the point is that after knight to a3, you're looking to reroute the knight to c4 and maybe just really put pressure on this e5 square. Whereas from c6, c3, the knight is just kind of blocking this pawn from moving forward. Yeah, that's my best explanation for why the computer would want knight to a3. But he played the more natural knight back to c3. I played this move bishop to b4, which I thought was kind of interesting. Just developing my bishop, putting some pressure on white's pieces, and kind of, putting some backwards pressure on this pawn as well. Now I did see he can push this pawn to a6. And at first I wasn't sure if I liked him being able to do this. Now the crazy thing is here, the computer says that you should just trade everything here. Um, But I just didn't even consider this because I just didn't like how active white's rook becomes. Here it's saying something like c5, which actually now that I'm looking at this makes some sense because if white were to take, then we can recapture and we've got rid of our weakness here on c6. And I don't know. I guess we can just castle. We have the bishop pair in an open game. Open meaning that there's no pawns blocking the center of the board, right? If there were pawns, stuck in the center because they can't take each other, maybe like here, 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 then this would be closed and the bishops wouldn't have as much control of the game. But in this position, it's more open, so they do. But I didn't think about any of that. Instead, I thought, well, I can just play b5, which is an okay move. It restricts white's development to, these squares. Maybe restricts the knight's movement a little bit because these squares are not available. And I thought, I'm just going to trap this pawn on a6, and then I'm going to go try to win it at the right time, and then just have an outside pawn majority. Meaning I have 3 pawns here and my opponent has 2. And so then I can just, in the end game, start pushing these pawns and try to make a passed pawn. So that was my plan from here. He developed, we both castled, and then I started continuing my plan. Now here, it's already a slight inaccuracy because I missed a nice move that he has. Let's see. I guess better would just be to retreat my bishop. Interesting. So just kind of say, my bishop's primary purpose has been fulfilled, we're just going to bring him back. And get out of the way of this discovered attack, potentially, with the bishop taking my undefended bishop. So that makes sense. But here I missed that he has this knight to e4 move. And this is actually a pretty nice move that I underestimated for sure. Obviously, I wouldn't have played queen to b6 if I had seen this and realized how strong it is. The reason is that if I take the knight, then white takes my bishop. I've got to move my rook. Oh, and here... Wait, how come... Oh, wow. Yeah, I can't move my rook to the open file like you would think because then white has this skewer and then wins the rook. So I'd have to move it like to e8. And then here, this I would be terrified already. Just this open file right here staring into my queen. But... So I realized taking the knight is probably not the best thing to do. Sorry, that was the wrong move. Because I think this bishop being here is worse for me. So here, after that here, I did figure taking the knight either way is not as good for me. And the issue is, what I played in the game, which isn't terrible, is after takes, if the knight takes... Or not if. The point is that the knight will take my knight first with check, forcing this recapture. And then the queen can take my bishop, and my king is kind of open. And it's not anything concrete right now, but it might not take that many moves before my king will be really weak and an attack will be coming. But that's actually, after looking at this, I figured this might actually be my best shot. Now here, to prevent the queen from coming in, I played king to g7. He moved the knight here. Now, of course, I do not want... This is something to, to always think about. If I let white take my bishop, I have to take with this pawn. What does this do? This creates tripled pawns, right? If this pawn right here were to take, tripled pawns are almost always bad because each pawn can't defend the other pawn, and you can't like move them. You can only move the front pawn. They're just very, very weak. So I figured, well, I can't let him force me to have tripled pawns, so I'm going to slide my bishop back. So now if he takes my bishop, this would actually be a big mistake because I take with the h pawn, I open up the h file, and these pawns are much stronger than like triple isolated pawns. So like nobody's going to be taking these pawns ever, at least for the near future. So this would be like a very bad positional change in the position that white could make, which is why after I moved my bishop back to g6, rather than taking, he slid his rook up to a3, looking to swing it around to join in on the attack. This is called a rook lift, lifting up the rook to go find a different place, kind of usually in front of these pawns, to attack. Now here, it's kind of funny. I saw this, but I figured I was in time to prevent any any attack that white could have. So here I actually played the best move according to the computer, which after the game when I was analyzing with my opponent, he said that when I played this move, he thought to himself like, "Wow, this is brave." And it is kind of brave. It's a crazy move. Just okay, you're just going to give me a second. I'll just take your pawn on a6. And just kind of saying like, "Okay, prove to me that this rook coming in is that big of a deal wherever you're going to put him." He went rook to h3. Now, obviously here, I'm really concerned about the possibility of this queen coming to h6 in the right situation. It can get really ugly. So here I thought for a while, and I think, I said thought and think a lot in that sentence. I thought for a while, and I came to the conclusion that I needed to act quickly with my defense, and decided to play rook to h8. Now the point of rook to h8 was if white was to take my bishop, now I recapture once again with the h pawn, guarding h6 with my rook. So obviously if a rook takes, then you just recapture with the rook, and the queen has nothing here. Because that was a big threat in this position. Like if I played here, look at this, plus 4.2, knight takes g6. Because first of all, if I take with the h pawn now, it's a huge difference as I will get checkmated embarrassingly in the corner of the board right here. And if I take with the f pawn, well, it's not that much better because after queen h6, I can't go back to these two squares or else I get mated. So I have to come forward and accept that my king will be running around, and it's a pretty terrible position. White is dominating, as you can see. You're going to be getting the rook in. Everything is weak. The king is weak. And in the center, it's just terrible. So, because I saw all this, I figured I'm going to defend with rook to h8. Now, right when I played this move, I had a mini heart attack because I thought for one, not 1 second, but right after I played this move, I thought, holy cow, does he have queen to h6? Now, ignoring the evaluation bar, like just pretend that it's not here because it obviously ruins the fun. I was actually pretty scared of this at first. The point is, if he plays queen to h6, I'm basically forced to take. If I don't, well, this is just his queen being here is not good for me at all, and the rook being completely trapped in the corner. So I would take. And here I saw he can play knight to f5, stopping my king's retreat, and it's a double check. So the only thing I can do is go here. Now, if he had a dark squared bishop, it would be game over. Like if he could give me a check here, it would be pretty much just game over. I guess not in this exact position because the knight is undefended. But there's certain situations where it would just be completely lost if he could give me some check on the dark squares. But this is kind of interesting because I saw this first. I saw this after I made the rook to h8 move, this potential move for white, and I'm glad because I correctly evaluated multiple things at once. Actually, first of all, I correctly evaluated that after all of this stuff right here, the only continuation for white to not allow me to escape is f4. And I'll show you why. So I figured out if white does anything else, for example, uh, let's see, g4 defending the knight. I take with my bishop. Now, I don't take with the pawn, or else this is checkmate. Imagine getting mated like that. That would be crazy. I take with the bishop because now I can run my king away. And this is totally safe. Now, funny enough, this is the crazy thing about chess. If white's king was here, pretend like white's king is there, this is also mate. Now, of course, in this position, I could, if that was the case, I could just run my king, make a run for it. But anyways, just kind of a fun little thing to notice. So the point is, if I'm able to take this knight with my bishop, I give my king an escape square on g6. If he gives me like a check with the rook, I just take his knight. He gives me check with the bishop. I run up. And actually, I did look at this line during the game, and I saw there's nothing here for white. If he gives me checks, I'm just going to run away. And like I said, because my king has access to the dark squares, because white doesn't have a knight or a dark squared bishop, he can just make a run for it on the dark squares and make it back to g7, and I'm up a queen at this point. And a knight, actually, in this line, because I took the knight. So I evaluated that the only thing white can do is play f4 check, and that's correct, according to the engine. And the point is once again, my king is forced to take the knight, only move. And here, I also correctly evaluated, and I keep saying this, like I'm just glad that I was able to see all of this. I correctly evaluated that this position is a draw by perpetual check. So white would have to force a perpetual check here with bishop to d3 check, king to g4, and then bishop back. Because, for example, in this position, if white plays, I don't know, king h1, I'm just going to take this bishop. Pawn takes or rook takes. Now my king has escapes, and I'm going to be making it out. And if white tries to stop me, well, at this point I can do pretty much anything because white has no threats here. But like I can even just go here, and even if I had to do this, this is still totally winning because I just defend everything and I'm up a queen and a knight. So I saw all of that. I saw that white's only thing is to go back and forth, and my king is forced to just go back and forth, and this would just be a perpetual, so it would be a draw. And then the other thing I evaluated is as I was sitting here calculating all that, I could tell that he saw it too, and he was trying to figure out if he had something there. But here's the thing. After I played rook to h8, I think that he will not accept a draw, right? I think he's going to want to try to push for a win, which is fair. Like, I think he has reason to believe that he, might have some attack coming. So I thought, I don't think he's going to go into a line that forces a perpetual check. And it's kind of funny because after he sat there for probably 15, 20 minutes. And after all that time, I could tell he was trying to see if queen h6 worked. After all that time, he just kind of like had like a little like, what am I doing? Like, I'm just going to play a different move here, and played f4. So he was thinking like, why was I just calculating this like crazy queen sacrifice? I'm just going to play this, this move f4. Now, the funny thing is it's actually not the best move. It does look kind of scary. If I don't do anything about it, try to get my knight back, he's going to push f5. And if I take, oh yeah, this is crazy. If I take, now this works. Because after take, knight takes f5, the knight is defended by the rook. So after king to g5, he can play rook g3, and it's checkmate. Look at that. The knight guards here. The rook checks the king, and the bishop stops the escape to h5. And this rook defends the knight. Like, every piece is taking... That, if the game ended like this, man, I should just quit chess if I allowed this to happen. But luckily, I saw f5 is a pretty big threat. I'm not going to let that happen. So I pushed f5 myself. Now, I did realize my bishop is, as they say, pretty much just a tall pawn. Like, he's not really doing much in the game because he's stuck in behind all these pawns. But I figured, well, I'm going to just play this defensively. At the end of the day, I'm up a pawn, and I'm just going to try to get out of this position and get my bishop out of here, and then I'll be just up a pawn in the endgame. But I need to make sure that I don't just flat out lose. Now, the crazy thing in this position is this is one of the only moves that keeps an advantage for black. The other move is rook to d8. Now, I would never have calculated this out in a short time control. Maybe if I had more time, I could have seen this line. The point is that after rook to d8, white can't go f5 because I play rook takes d4. So ignore the threat on the bishop because obviously if takes, I can take the queen and it's a check, and then I'm going to be taking this pawn, and it's game over for white. But the point is that after queen to e3, which seemingly stops any sort of threat or attack, I play rook to e4. It can't be taken because the queen is pinned. And if like takes, takes, then I play h takes g6. And, oh, right. The knight is under attack and I'm threatening to take it, and I'm also threatening the bishop. So it's just a fork. So then I'd win a piece, basically. And then there was one other line I was looking at. Let's see, queen to e3. There was some crazy, maybe that was it. There was just some crazy way for me to defend against this threat of f5 that like I said, I would not have calculated in a shorter time control. I just played this move f5. Now my opponent played queen to e3, trying to go in here, maybe start something on the dark squares. And here I did see that I didn't really want him to be able to play queen to e5 because that forces my king to the back rank. I mean, obviously, like, you know, king h6 is literally just a checkmate in one with a similar tactic as I've shown earlier with this double check. So, you know, the king would be forced to the back rank. Now, if I played like some other move here, some dumb move, now I can't play f6 because the queen will just take this pawn on e6, and this is pretty bad for me. So I saw here, I don't want to let him get to e5 and threaten to take my pawn on e6 if I push f6 to block the check. So I played this move that I quite liked, that I found, c5. Oh, meh. I do that every once in a while. I wonder if there's a way to disable that, where I accidentally hit like down or up, and then it goes to the end of the game. So I played c5 because after these trades, I don't know. I just figured I kind of have well, first of all, I'm up a pawn. So I have a pawn majority here. I have one more pawn than white does on the king side. You know, this area. But then I also have a potential to create an outside passed pawn on the queen side with, you know, these moves. Yeah, a5, b4, a4, a3. Of course, once more pieces get traded off. My opponent played b4, and I moved my knight back. This started to get kind of complicated. I wasn't sure who was better here because after he takes my queen and I recapture, my pawns are doubled, which usually isn't good. However, I figured I'm creating enough threats that I think it's okay. First of all, if the bishop just takes my pawn, then I take this pawn. And this is pretty good for black. I've got this open file. I'm going to bring my other rook. And this rook and knight, like, before all of this trading happened with the queen and everything, and before the position got locked with these pawns, the knight and the rook were actually being kind of a threat over here with my king. But now in the following positions, they're kind of just off to the side, not really doing much because there's no threats here. In the game, my opponent defended his pawn with c3. So I defended my pawn. I figured, well, you know, even though it's a doubled pawn, it's still a pawn. Might as well prevent him from being able to do anything with it. He took this open file, so I challenged him on it with my other rook. He moved his knight back, which is actually a pretty big inaccuracy. I was expecting more something like, well, what's wrong with this? Because I did see that there was something wrong with this. Oh yeah, I just play knight to d5, and I'm attacking this pawn, and then I'm going to be pressuring this pawn, this pawn. So like if g3, then I mean, I'm going to maybe give a check and bring my rook around. Yeah, and threaten to take this pawn, and he can't do anything to save it. So here it was already kind of, what's the word? Dangerous for white. It's already about -1. He had to trade the rooks and then go bishop to f3, which looks pretty unnatural. I don't really know. I guess maybe it's just to take the knight if it ever goes to d5. Like if I go knight to d5, I bet you that it's... Oh, well, now if I go knight to d5, he can pin me, so that's not great. But anyways, he did not take. Instead, like I said, he moved his knight back to f3, which allowed me to take his rook and then attack his pawn. When he defended it, though, I have this nice little fork with my knight. And the nice thing about this is, like, yeah, he can take this doubled pawn, but then I'm going to be getting more important pawns than my doubled pawn. Instead, he moved his knight here, which I thought was also kind of interesting. I guess just trying to take this pawn with his knight, attack my rook, and defend the pawn. But here, I just took his pawn. Now, this is actually a little bit of a mistake. It says I should have taken the pawn. Oh, yeah, that's nice, because if knight takes, I can take the bishop, because if he takes my rook, I take his rook and I'm up a piece. So he would have to move his bishop back, and then I can just go right back. And if he takes, then I go rook to a8, just bring it back. Oh, and he can't ever attack my knight here, because then I just take the pawn. Yeah, that's nice. But instead, I figured I'll trade the rooks here. And here, I thought, even if we get into this position now, I'm not going to take his knight. See, look at that. If this all happened, he didn't actually go for this, but if he did that, I figured I'm not going to take his knight, because then my light squared bishop is not very good in this position, because it's stuck over here, and also his pawns are not easy for my bishop to attack. So I need to keep my knight alive. And in fact, not outside of this, there's also just knight to d5, which forks these pawns. So I could then take this pawn, and I would have this passed pawn. But instead of doing all that, he defended this pawn, I guess setting up knight takes b5, because then here it wouldn't be a fork, even though he can't even defend this pawn in that position. So I don't know. But I went knight to d5, attacking the pawn. He defended it with his knight. And here I played this nice move, f6. I saw that this is one of the ways I can get my bishop out. I didn't want to go bishop to h5, because I figured if I go bishop to h5, he can go maybe king to f2. It looks like that's an okay move for white. Just stopping some of these squares for my bishop. Now I can go like bishop to d1, which is okay. Trying to get around this way, but I just wasn't sure if it was all that great up here. I preferred to play f6, which is actually, I'm glad I found this move, because it is minus 2.5, and the next best move is minus 0.6. So this move keeps my advantage by about the equivalent of 2 pawns. So pretty important move to find. He played knight to d8, attacking my pawn. And at first, I was a little bit scared about this move, because I thought maybe I had blundered this because my king can't defend. Now, my bishop can defend, but it's not the best, because he can start going after my pawns over here and make them weak, and I just wasn't really sure I liked that. But I liked the move that I found, which is also one of the best moves according to the engine, in this position, which was just knight to c7. Defending both of my pawns that were under attack, actually, funny enough. And now I got into my head like a formation of my bishop and knight that I wanted before I brought my king over. He started bringing his king to the center, and I figured I want to bring my bishop to this square on d7. That way, I'm defending all of my weak pawns multiple times, so I'm really solid here. So that's exactly what I did over the next couple turns. He brought his king all the way to the center, but my pawns, especially my doubled pawns, see, doubled pawns are not always a liability, right? In this case, all my pawns are acting as like a shield. Like there's literally this little barrier that the king can't go into because of these pawns. So in a way, I don't think that this plan by white was necessarily the best, and in fact, it does drop the advantage quite a bit. I mean, it's already quite lost in this position, minus like 3.3, and then it just brings it up to like minus 5.3. But still, it's, a considerable amount, thinking that he brought his king to the center. That's what you're always supposed to do in games, right? Well, I guess it depends, because this little, oh, didn't mean to do that, because of the little force field that my pawns have. Once his king was here, though, and, well, I guess more specifically, once my bishop and my knight were positioned where I wanted them, I started to bring my king. And actually, right here, I noticed, hold on, his knight has no moves out here. The only safe square for the knight is b7. But after b7, the knight can't continue up here because of my pawn on b6. Once again, my doubled pawns. I mean, in this position, I have two sets of doubled pawns, and these ones are isolated. They're not even, I mean, this pawn structure is at least more solid because this e6 pawn can defend the front pawn here. This one's less solid in most situations, but in this case, white can't do anything about it because I'm over defending my weakness. And not only is it keeping the king out, like I mentioned earlier, but it's also creating some barriers for the knight to try to, escape. The knight can't really come back here. So I saw here that if my king gets to e7 and the knight goes to b7, the only escape would be back here, but my king would be guarding those squares too, so the knight's just totally trapped. And my, once again, doubled pawns stopping the bishop from coming in and helping the knight. So in this position, I mean, pretty straightforward now. I was able to win the knight. Now, my opponent tried something a little tricky. I mean, it's not too tricky because really anything would still be winning. I could give up one of my pieces and still be completely winning because now I'm up a ton of pawns as well. But I guess he was just trying to pull something. Just see, might as well. And that's totally respectable. But here I just figured, well, I'm just going to try to trade the bishops. Now, I saw he can get this passed pawn, but then I simply push. And he can run after me, but he's just not fast enough. And I promoted. I actually don't know. Let me see. I don't know why that's in here. He takes a6. I don't know. Maybe I was just... Yeah, in the game, I have written down here that he just resigned after this move. I think I was just showing that he can't chase after me. And of course, the point is first of all, his pawn can't start going because then I can just take it. I mean, the funny thing is, even if I didn't have my knight there, we would still both queen. And this is slightly not... Like, this is definitely more drawable if I don't have my knight. Ignore the knight here. If I didn't have it, I wonder what it would be like. Probably not. I mean, even here, it says it's still winning for black. It's definitely harder, but the point is, even without the knight, it's still a good position for black here. But with the knight, the pawn can't get through, and even if the king came, I have the luxury of choosing either to guard my knight, and then the pawn will never be able to come here, or of simply pushing, because after takes, I get a queen first, and there's nothing the white can do here. So, that was round 2. Like I said, right here, my opponent resigned. So it was round 2. It was I would say, a pretty nice game. Didn't really have any major blunders or mistakes. It was mostly just some small misunderstandings about the opening, and I don't know, maybe just a couple of small inaccuracies along the way. But like I mentioned earlier, I'm glad that I found the whole line with... Let me find it. Glad I found the whole line with this queen h6. And I was really scared that I'd plugged stuff into the computer and it would turn out that I was totally losing here if he did something. I mean, at the same point, it's like, well, I've already won, so he can't go back and change that. But the point is, I'm glad that I correctly evaluated this position to be a forced perpetual with white, and that I also correctly assumed that my opponent would not be down for that. Now, if he had been losing the whole game, of course, he probably would go for this. But the fact that he most likely, I mean, the fact that he brought his rook over, he had the ideas of an attack, and he did find this nice, where was that? Knight e4 move. I think after this move, he probably thought that he was like, you know, in the driver's seat, which is true. He does have a lot of control in the game now, and so anyways, the point is like, I'm glad that I also assumed that he probably won't want to go for that line, which means that I could still have some chances, and then I just had the opportunities presented to me to continue growing my advantage, and yeah, now currently in the series, in this event that I played in, right, the first game was a draw, like I went over, and then, of course, with this win, that puts me at 1.5 points out of a potential 3. So it's all up to this final game. The last game I'm playing is against, my opponent has beat the other 2 players in the quad, so he's got 2 points. So I know going into it, I need a win to win the quad. A draw will, give him 2.5 at the end and me 2. So stay tuned for that episode and find out what happens in the final round of this tournament. And with that, see everybody. Have a nice day.